"Morning, sunshine," Obi said, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud for the sterile quiet of the hospital room. She leaned in, and I instinctively tilted my head for a kiss, the usual morning ritual, even in this place. But her lips just brushed my cheek, quick and dry, like she was checking off a box. It wasn't like her. Obi was always a hugger, a proper kisser. Even when life threw its usual curveballs, our mornings started with that small, solid connection. I watched her as she fiddled with the wilting supermarket flowers she'd brought yesterday, rearranging them in the plastic vase like she was solving a complex puzzle. She was wearing jeans, yeah, but not the paint-splattered ones she wore around the house. These were darker, newer, and with a subtle, almost intentional rip at the knee. And her eyelashes, longer, darker than they usually looked first thing. Was that mascara? Obi usually only bothered with makeup for going out, dinners with friends, the occasional gallery opening we'd get dragged to. Hospital visits were usually a leggings and messy bun affair. "How'd you sleep?" she asked, finally turning to face me, but her eyes flicked around the room, landing anywhere but on mine. It was like she was cataloging the beige walls, the humming machines, anything to avoid real contact. Okay, I lied. The truth was, I hadn't slept well at all. The strange bed, the beeping monitors, the low throb in my side. All of it kept me hovering somewhere between wakefulness and uneasy dreams. But more than the physical discomfort, it was this shift. This quiet distance that had started to creep in with Obi. In the first few days after they rushed me here, heart acting up, the doctors called it a flare-up. Obi had been my lifeline. Visits every other day felt like a feast in this bland existence. Evenings were filled with her messages. Funny memes, updates about the cat, just everyday stuff that made the hospital room feel a little less like a prison. We'd text back and forth until late, sometimes even falling asleep with our phones still buzzing with goodnight messages. But in the last few days, the messages had thinned out. Good morning texts became absent. Evening check-ins turned into short, clipped replies. "Busy day," was her standard answer. Busy with what? Our life had ground to a halt the moment I landed in this bed. What exactly had gotten busier for her? "Anything interesting happened today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, casual, like I was just making conversation. She shrugged, still not meeting my eyes. "Work stuff. You know." She smoothed down her jeans, her fingers lingering a little too long on that ripped knee. It was a deliberate rip, I realized, inspecting it closer. Not accidental. Stylish. "Right," I said, the word feeling heavy in my mouth. "Work." Obi worked from home, a freelance graphic designer. Work stuff usually involved deadlines and frantic calls with clients, not ripped jeans and mascara. A silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I watched her, really watched her. The way she kept touching her hair, a new, subtle blonde highlight catching the bland hospital light. The way her fingers tapped nervously against her phone screen, even though it was blank. It was like she was wound up tight, vibrating with a nervous energy she wasn't letting me in on. "You look nice," I finally said, the words sounding clumsy, loaded with unspoken questions. She finally looked at me then, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Annoyance? Guilt? I couldn't tell. "Nice," she repeated, a slight edge to her voice. "What's that supposed to mean?" And just like that, the cheerful facade cracked. The morning sunshine dimmed, leaving a chill in its place. It wasn't just the sparse messages, the quick cheek kiss, the clothes. It was the tone. Defensive. Distant. Like I was already on the other side of some invisible line she'd drawn between us. And for the first time, a cold, hard thought lodged itself in my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. It wasn't just distance. It was something sharper, something colder, something that felt a whole lot like betrayal. "Nice." Her voice was sharp, the word bouncing off the sterile walls and echoing in my head long after she'd said it. What's that supposed to mean? It meant I saw her. Really saw her. Not the Obi who threw on sweats and worried about dinner, but someone different. Someone who cared how she looked, who she was looking good for. The word betrayal, from the end of my thoughts in the first part of my thoughts, began to echo louder now. The next couple of days crawled by, each beat of the heart monitor a mocking soundtrack to my growing unease. Obi's visits became sporadic. Used to be every other day, regular as clockwork. Now it stretched to 3 days, then almost 4. Each missed visit felt like another brick in the wall she was building between us. Messages were even rarer now, just short texts, emojis that felt more like punctuation marks than actual communication. "Thinking of you," she'd send, but it felt as empty as the plastic vase in the corner. But then she'd show up, and it was almost worse. Because she'd be on. Like she was performing. Bright smiles, exaggerated concern, asking all the right questions. "Did you eat? Are you in pain? Did the doctor say anything new?" But her eyes never quite landed on mine. They'd dart around, focusing on everything but me, as if afraid of what she might find if she looked too closely. And then there was Charlie. Charlie was my day nurse. Mid-30s, maybe, with kind eyes and a quiet competence that I actually found really reassuring. He was good at his job, efficient but also present. He'd explain things clearly, check on me regularly, and had this easygoing manner that made the endless hours in that room a little less suffocating. I started noticing a pattern. Obi's visits. They seemed to coincide with Charlie's shifts. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. Hospitals run on shifts, right? But then it kept happening. Day after day. Obi would breeze in during the late afternoon, right when Charlie was usually making his rounds. And when they were in the room together, it was like watching a different play unfold. Obi's forced cheerfulness would amplify, directed. Not at me, but at Charlie. She'd laugh a little too loudly at something he said, her hand lingering a beat too long when she handed him the wilting flowers to dispose of. Charlie, to his credit, remained professional, but even there was a subtle shift. A warmer smile directed her way, a slightly softer tone in his voice when he spoke to her. Just little things, almost imperceptible if you weren't looking for them. But I was looking. I was watching everything. One afternoon, Obi was rearranging the flowers again, fussing with them like they held the secrets of the universe. She leaned over the bedside table, her back to me, adjusting the vase. Her sweater shifted. And that's when I saw it. Or rather, what I didn't see. The telltale outline of a bra strap under her sweater. Gone. Clean line of fabric against skin. Nothing. A cold wave washed over me, so intense it momentarily eclipsed the dull ache in my side. It wasn't just the makeup, the jeans, the infrequent visits, the forced smiles. It was this deliberate carelessness. Or was it deliberate? Was it a message? A signal? Or just, she didn't care anymore. Didn't care enough to even bother with the basics, because she wasn't trying to impress me anymore. My breath hitched in my throat. It felt like the air had suddenly thickened, becoming harder to draw into my lungs. My heart monitor, usually a steady beep-beep, quickened its pace, mirroring the frantic drumming in my chest. Betrayal wasn't just a word anymore. It was a physical sensation. A cold knot in my stomach, a tightening in my chest, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. I watched her straighten up, turning back to face me, all bright smiles and empty questions. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The confusion, the anxiety, the gnawing suspicion. It all coalesced into a grim, stark understanding. It wasn't just that she was distant. It wasn't just that she looked different. It was that she was gone. Already gone, even while standing right there in the room. And the space she'd left, it felt like it was being filled by someone else. Someone named Charlie, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "You okay, Frank?" Obi asked, her voice laced with that fake concern, but her eyes flicked past me towards the door, as if expecting someone. Expecting him. "Yeah, fine," I managed to croak out, my voice rough, unfamiliar even to my own ears. "Just tired. Tired. Yeah, that was it. Tired of the lies, the pretense, the sickening weight of knowing without knowing for sure. Tired of pretending everything was okay when everything, absolutely everything, felt horribly, irrevocably broken. And in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and wilting flowers, I felt a loneliness so profound it was almost a physical ache. It wasn't just my heart that was acting up anymore. It was breaking. Quietly. Silently. While my wife smiled at my nurse and wondered if I'd eaten my lunch. The beeping. God. The relentless beeping. It was supposed to monitor my heart, keep me safe, but all it did was amplify the frantic hammering already going on in my chest. Tired. I was beyond tired. Tired of the hospital food, the plastic smiles, the forced cheerfulness of my wife, the nagging suspicion that chewed at me from the inside out. But mostly, I was just tired of waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for her, waiting for something to break. And suddenly, I couldn't wait anymore. Not for doctors, not for visiting hours, not for Obi to show up with her practiced routine. I had to know. I had to see. Now. Stupid. Probably. Irresponsible. Definitely. But that cold dread in my gut, the one that had been growing steadily colder and heavier, it was screaming at me louder than any sense of reason. I ripped the leads off my chest. The monitor shrieked for a second, a flat, accusing tone that mirrored my own internal alarm bells. Ignoring it, I threw off the hospital gown, grabbing my jeans and sweater from the pathetic little wardrobe they'd given me. Threw on felt too casual. I practically wrestled myself into my clothes, clumsy and shaky, my body protesting the sudden movement. No note, no explanation. Just gone. I walked out of that room, out of the ward, out of the damn hospital, each step a rebellious act against the sickbed, against the uncertainty, against the beeping that had become the soundtrack to my misery. I hailed a cab outside, giving the driver my address, the words feeling foreign, almost like a place I no longer belonged. The taxi ride was a blur of city lights and internal turmoil. Each red light felt like an eternity, each green light a fleeting rush towards what? Confrontation. Confirmation. Just the cold, hard truth, whatever it might be. My hands were clammy, my pulse erratic. Leaving the hospital like that, it was reckless, insane. But sitting there, trapped in that sterile room, slowly suffocating on suspicion, that felt even more insane. As the taxi turned onto our street, I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on our house. Familiar, comfortable, or so it used to be. And then I saw it. Parked a little way down the street, just past our driveway, a car I recognized. Charlie's car. Dark sedan, nothing flashy, practical like him. And then, the front door of my house opened. And he stepped out. Charlie. My nurse. Coming out of my house. At, what time was it? Late afternoon. But not visiting hours late. Not checking on the patient, late. Just coming out. He paused on the porch, adjusting his jacket, then walked towards his car, keys in hand. He looked relaxed. Almost content. The cab slowed to a stop in front of our house. I paid the driver, my hand trembling as I fumbled with my wallet. My gaze was locked on Charlie. He got into his car, started the engine, checked his mirror, and pulled away. Away from my house. Away from my wife. My feet felt heavy, leaden, as I walked up the path to the front door. Each step was a battle against the sickening dread that threatened to pull me under. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers clumsy and unresponsive. The key scraped in the lock, the door clicked open, and I stepped inside. Silence. The house was quiet, too quiet. No music, no TV, no clatter of dishes, just silence. And then, a sound. Faint, muffled, coming from upstairs. Footsteps. Quick, light footsteps. And then, Obi's voice. Soft, murmuring, indistinct. I moved through the living room, the familiar furniture suddenly alien, distorted by the lens of suspicion. My heart was pounding, a painful drum against my ribs. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood there, listening, every nerve ending on high alert. Just a minute, Obi's voice, clearer now, a little breathless. Then more footsteps, coming closer. And then she appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing my robe. My old, faded blue robe that I'd left at home. It swallowed her whole, the sleeves hanging past her wrists, the tie cinched loosely at her waist. Her hair was a mess, tumbling around her shoulders like she'd just what? Just woken up. Her eyes widened when she saw me, a jolt of pure, unadulterated shock flashing across her face. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving her pale, almost ghostly. The breath hitched in her throat, and for a moment, she just stood there, frozen, speechless, like a deer caught in headlights. "Frank," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile, broken sound. What are you doing here? What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice hoarse, rough from disuse, from unshed tears, from a burning anger that was finally finding its voice. I took a step forward, then another, slowly climbing the stairs, each step measured, deliberate, closing the distance between us. "Maybe you should tell me, Obi. What exactly were you doing?" She took a step back, stumbling slightly, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. I don't know what you mean." Her voice was trembling now, thin and reedy. "A lie. A pathetic, transparent lie." "Charlie," I said, the name hanging in the air between us, heavy, accusatory. "Charlie just left our house, Obi. Your day nurse, Charlie. Remember him?" Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape route, for a lifeline, anything to cling to. He was just checking on you. He was worried. He wanted to see how you were doing." The words tumbled out, rushed, nonsensical, desperate. "Checking on me?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the quiet hallway. "Charlie was checking on me here? In our bedroom, Obi? You think I'm stupid?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks, blurring her mascara. "No, Frank, please, you don't understand." "Understand what, Obi?" "Understand that my wife is sleeping with my goddamn nurse while I'm lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, wondering if I'm going to make it." My voice cracked, breaking on the last words, the raw pain finally breaking through the wall of anger. She started sobbing then, a choked, broken sound, sinking onto the top step, the robe falling open, revealing nothing. Just her pale skin, the flimsy strap of a nightgown. No bra. Again. Just like in the hospital. Careless. Or deliberate. The message was clear now, screamingly clear. "Please, Frank," she sobbed, her face buried in her hands. I'm so sorry. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to." "Didn't mean for it to?" I stared at her, the tears in my own eyes blurring my vision. "You didn't mean for it to? You think that makes it okay? You think sorry even begins to cover this, Obi? This betrayal." The word tasted like poison in my mouth. She didn't answer, just kept sobbing, her shoulders shaking, her body racked with guilt and shame. Guilt and shame for getting caught, maybe. Not for the act itself. Not for the months of deception, the lies, the sheer disrespect. Rage, cold and furious, washed over me, eclipsing the pain, eclipsing the hurt. Something inside me snapped. Something essential, something vital. The love, the trust, the belief. All gone. Shattered. "Pack your things, Obi," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, colder than ice. "Pack your things and get out. Now." I don't want to see you in this house again. Not after this. She looked up at me then, her face tear-streaked, swollen, a flicker of something. Fear? Panic. In her red-rimmed eyes. Frank, please, don't do this. We can talk. We can work through this. There is nothing to talk about, I said, each word a hammer blow. And there is nothing to work through. You cheated on me, Obi. In my hospital bed. With my nurse. That's not something you work through. That's finished. Pack. And go. I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing on the stairs, the sound echoing behind me, a hollow, meaningless cry in the silence of our broken home. Finished. It was finished. Infidelity. Betrayal. Scandal. It was all there, laid bare, ugly and raw. But even as I walked away, a chilling thought wormed its way into my mind, a whisper in the back of my head. Something about the hospital. Something about a secret. The headline. Far more damaging than infidelity. Infidelity was just the beginning, wasn't it? It was just the ugly, painful surface. But what lay beneath? What other secrets was the hospital holding? And what did they have to do with me? The silence after she left was deafening. The slamming of the front door echoed through the empty house, each reverberation a physical blow. Then, just quiet. Heavy, oppressive quiet that settled over everything, suffocating the air, pressing down on my chest until it hurt to breathe. She was gone. Really gone. The finality of it hit me then, not with a bang, but with a slow, chilling creep. Like the blood draining from my veins, leaving me cold and hollow. I wandered through the house, a ghost in my own life. The living room, still faintly scented with her perfume, a ghost of her presence. The kitchen, with her coffee mug still on the counter, half filled, a stale monument to a morning that would never be repeated. Upstairs, the bedroom. Our bedroom. The bed still rumpled from what? From her hurried packing? Or something else? The thought twisted in my gut, bile rising in my throat. Rage warred with despair, anger battling grief. 1 minute I wanted to smash everything in sight, tear down the walls, obliterate every trace of her existence. The next, a wave of desolate sadness would wash over me, leaving me weak, trembling, longing for what? For things to be different. For her to be different. For the lie to be undone. Impossible. All impossible now. By evening, the physical weakness had returned, tenfold. Leaving the hospital, the adrenaline of confrontation, it had masked the lingering ache in my side, the fatigue that had settled deep in my bones. Now, back in the oppressive silence of the house, it all came crashing down. I was still sick. I was alone. And now, I was heartbroken too. Against my better judgment, against every angry, wounded fiber of my being, I called a cab. Going back to that sterile, beeping prison felt like defeat, like admitting I couldn't cope, couldn't handle even a single night in my own home. But the thought of spending the night alone, surrounded by the ghosts of US, was even worse. Back in the hospital room, the familiar beeping of the monitors felt almost comforting. At least here, there was a rhythm, a pulse, something constant in the chaos of my inner world. As soon as the night nurse, a tired-looking woman named Maria, came in to reattach the leads and check my vitals, the anger, the raw, burning anger, surged back. "I need to speak to someone in charge," I said, my voice rough, still thick with unshed tears and spent rage. Maria paused, her eyebrows furrowed in concern. "Is everything all right, Mr. Hayes? Are you in pain?" "Pain?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You want to talk about pain? Let me tell you about pain, Maria." And then it all came spilling out. The suspicion, the signs, the ripped jeans, the missing bra, the infrequent visits, the forced smiles, and finally, the ultimate confirmation. Charlie. My wife. In my bed. With my nurse. Maria listened, her face growing increasingly pale, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. When I finished, breathless and shaking, she just stared at me for a moment, speechless. Then she said, her voice hushed, "Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. This is terrible. Terrible." I repeated, the words sounding weak, inadequate. "It's beyond terrible, Maria. It's a goddamn scandal. And it's happening in your hospital. With your employee. I understand, Mr. Hayes. I really do. I'll get the charge nurse. Please, just try to calm down." She hurried out of the room, leaving me alone again with the beeping and the burning rage. It wasn't long before a woman in a crisp white coat appeared, her face tight with professional concern. Ms. Davies, the charge nurse, listened to my story, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the flicker of shock in her eyes. She asked a few questions, her voice calm and measured, but her questions felt like probes, digging into the raw wound of my humiliation. "Mr. Hayes, this is highly inappropriate and completely unacceptable," she said finally, her voice firm, but still carefully controlled. "We take these matters extremely seriously. I assure you, we will investigate this immediately." Investigate. It sounded so clinical, so detached from the gut-wrenching reality of what had happened. "Investigate," I said, my voice rising again. "There's nothing to investigate. I saw him coming out of my house. My wife confessed. What more investigation do you need? I want him fired. Now, that thing, Charlie, I want him out of this hospital. He doesn't deserve to wear your uniform. He doesn't deserve to be anywhere near patients, preying on vulnerable people, betraying their trust, betraying me." Ms. Davies didn't flinch. She just nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I understand your anger, Mr. Hayes. And I assure you, we will take swift action. I will personally see to it that Mr. Miller is relieved of his duties immediately, pending a full investigation. And appropriate disciplinary action will be taken." And just like that, it was done. A few hushed phone calls, a flurry of activity outside my room, and then, silence. Charlie was gone. Fired. Disgraced. A small, hollow victory in the vast landscape of my defeat. It didn't bring Obi back. It didn't undo the betrayal. It didn't heal the gaping wound in my heart. But it was something. A tangible consequence. A flicker of control in a situation where I felt utterly powerless. Obi never came back to the hospital. No visits. No messages. Nothing. It was like she'd vanished off the face of the earth, leaving me alone to pick up the shattered pieces of my life. The silence in the hospital room was still deafening, but now it was a different kind of silence. Not the oppressive quiet of betrayal, but the hollow echo of loneliness. Days turned into nights. The doctors ran more tests, tweaked my medication, monitored my heart. Physically, I was stable. Improving, they said. But inside, I was crumbling. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of Obi, of US, trying to reconcile the bright, laughing woman I thought I knew with a cold, deceitful stranger who had walked out of my life. What had I done wrong? Where had I failed? Was it me? Was I not enough? Had I become boring, predictable, sick? Self-doubt gnawed at me, whispering insidious questions in the dark hours of the night. Was this my fault? Had I pushed her away? Had I become so consumed by my own health problems that I'd neglected her, ignored her needs, driven her into someone else's arms? Then, anger would flare again. No, it wasn't my fault. She was the one who betrayed me. She was the one who lied, who cheated, who broke her vows, who shattered our life with her selfishness and her disgusting lack of empathy. Rage, hot and furious, would consume me, burning away the self-doubt, leaving behind only a bitter, corrosive resentment. But even anger couldn't sustain itself forever. Eventually, it would burn itself out, leaving behind only a vast emptiness, a profound sadness. Regret. Regret for what we had lost, for what we could have been, for the future that was now irrevocably, brutally stolen. We had built a life together, brick by brick, year by year. And she had demolished it all with a casual act of infidelity, a selfish, thoughtless affair. Affair. The word felt so small, so inadequate to describe the magnitude of the destruction she had wrought. One afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I watched them, mesmerized, drifting aimlessly in the golden light. And in that quiet moment, something shifted again. Not rage, not sadness, not self-doubt. Just acceptance. A quiet, weary acknowledgement of the reality. It was over. She was gone. The marriage was finished. And nothing I could do would change that. The pain was still there, a dull, persistent ache in my chest. The scars would remain, deep and jagged, reminders of the betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss. But beneath the pain, beneath the scars, a tiny seed of something else began to sprout. Not hope, not exactly. More like resignation. And maybe, just maybe, within that resignation, a fragile, tentative possibility of moving forward. Of building something new, something different, from the wreckage. Alone. But even as that fragile hope flickered, a shadow lingered at the edge of my awareness. The headline. The hospital held a secret far more damaging than infidelity. Infidelity was done. Dealt with. Scandalous, painful, life-altering, yes. But done. Finished. Yet, the headline. It promised something more. Something worse. Something hidden within the walls of this hospital, beyond the petty drama of cheating spouses and fired nurses. A secret. What secret? And why did I suddenly feel a chilling premonition that it was somehow, terrifyingly, connected to me? Discharge papers in hand, a small bag of hastily repacked clothes at my feet, I stood outside the hospital doors, blinking against the sudden glare of the late morning sun. The air was crisp, clean, a sharp contrast to the sterile recycled air of the ward. It felt shockingly ordinary. Life going on, buses rumbling past, people rushing to work, oblivious to the internal earthquake that had just ripped through my world. Stepping into a taxi felt surreal. Leaving the hospital, leaving behind the beeping and the medicine and the forced smiles of the nurses, it should have felt like freedom. But it felt incomplete. Like I was leaving a chapter unfinished, unresolved. Except, it was finished, wasn't it? The hospital stay, the marriage, the charade. All over. Done. Back in the house. The silence was different now. Not oppressive, not accusatory, just empty. A vast, echoing emptiness that mirrored the hollowness inside me. Obi's scent was fading, her things mostly gone. A few forgotten hair ties on the bathroom counter, a stray earring glinting under the bedside table. Pathetic little relics of a life that no longer existed. I started slowly, tentatively, to reclaim the space as mine. Obi's carefully curated decor, the pastel cushions, the delicate knickknacks. They all felt alien now, relics of a shared aesthetic that was no longer shared. I started small, replacing the flowery throw pillows with a worn leather one from the attic. Then, I swapped out the pastel abstract prints for some old black and white photography I'd always liked. Little changes, subtle shifts, but each one felt like a small act of reclaiming my identity, of reasserting my presence in a space that had become diluted by U.S. The divorce papers were next. A stark, bureaucratic document that reduced years of shared life to legal clauses and financial settlements. Sitting in the lawyer's office, signing my name on the dotted lines, it felt strangely anticlimactic. No dramatic pronouncements, no tearful goodbyes, just ink on paper. But with each signature, with each initial, a weight lifted, a tether snapped. The marriage was officially, legally, irrevocably over. And with it, the pretense, the lies, the betrayal. It was done. Friends, bless them, rallied around. Liam, my oldest friend, practically dragged me out for a beer, insisting that sitting at home moping was not on the agenda. Sarah, Obi's former best friend, surprisingly, reached out, offering a quiet, empathetic ear without judgment or forced cheerfulness. Small gestures, simple acts of human connection, but they were lifelines in the isolating sea of grief. Slowly, tentatively, I started to emerge from the self-imposed isolation. Dinners with friends, walks in the park, even venturing back to the dusty guitar in the corner of the living room, coaxing out hesitant chords, rediscovering the solace of music. Hobbies I'd let slide during the busy years of US, photography, hiking, even just losing myself in a good book. They became anchors, grounding me in the present, reminding me of who I was, beyond husband, beyond betrayed. It wasn't easy. There were still days when the sadness would hit, a sudden, unexpected wave of grief that threatened to pull me under. Memories would surface unbidden, a shared joke, a cozy evening, a stolen kiss, sharp, painful reminders of what was lost. Anger still flickered, resentment still lingered, but they were losing their sharp edges, becoming duller, less consuming. One evening, sitting on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and gold, a strange sense of peace settled over me. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, a phantom limb of a lost love. But it was manageable. I looked around at the small changes I'd made to the house. My books on the shelves, my photos on the walls, my guitar leaning against the armchair. It was becoming my space again. I was becoming myself again. Frank. Just Frank. Not Frank and Obi, not Obi's husband. Just me. And in that quiet moment, the epiphany came. Not a blinding flash of insight, but a slow, dawning realization. The end of the marriage, the brutal, heartbreaking betrayal, it wasn't just a tragedy, a failure, a loss. It was also an opportunity. A painful, unwanted, utterly devastating opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. An opportunity to rebuild, to redefine, to start over. To reclaim not just my house, but my life. To discover who I was, who I could be, on my own terms, without the shadow of betrayal, without the weight of a broken promise. The betrayal had been a fire, scorching the landscape of my life, leaving behind ashes and devastation. But from those ashes, something new could grow. Something stronger, something more resilient, something authentically me. The scars would always be there, a map of the pain I had endured, a reminder of the fragility of trust, the sting of infidelity. But scars, I realized, are also proof of healing. Proof of survival. Proof that even after the worst kind of heartbreak, life, somehow, finds a way to go on. Looking out at the darkening sky, a sliver of moon rising pale and luminous, a fragile sense of hope flickered within me, a tiny spark in the vast emptiness. The future was uncertain, unknown, stretching out before me like a blank canvas. But for the first time in a long time, the blankness didn't feel terrifying. It felt liberating. A chance to paint a new picture, to create a new life, to define my own horizon. Alone, yes. But also free. Free to be me. Free to start again. Free to heal. And then, as the night deepened, a flicker of that old unease returned, a subtle chill in the hopeful air. The headline. The hospital held a secret far more damaging than infidelity. Infidelity was over. Divorce was pending. Life was, tentatively, painstakingly, moving on. But the hospital secret, that thread remained, unresolved, hanging in the air like a question mark. A question mark that suddenly felt less like a distant headline and more like a chilling premonition, a whisper of something else, something darker, something still to come. Something within those sterile hospital walls, something far more damaging than even betrayal, waiting in the shadows. And a prickle of ice traced its way down my spine as I wondered, with a growing sense of dread, if my story was truly over, or if, in some terrifying way, it was only just beginning.